ජිනදන්ත ධාතු
2020 කන්ද උඩරට ඇසල මහා පෙරහර සන්නිවේදන දායකත්වය
අපේ මනුදම් යහගුණදම් මතු පරපුරටත් සන්නිවේදනය කරමු. ශ්‍රී ලංකා ටෙලිකොම් වෙතින් සදහම් පණිවිඩයක්.
විකාශන දායකත්වය බැතිසිත් දායකත්වය
අපේ රටේ අනාගතයට රැකවරණය ශ්‍රී ලංකා ඉන්ෂුරන්ස් පියකුමින් මවකමින්
ලංකා බැංකුව නව්‍යකරණයෙන් ඉදිරියටම මහජන බැංකුව මහජනතාවගේ බැංකුව හෙමු එයයි වත්කම අපට ආදරණීය මව්බිම සමග මැලිබන් හැමදාමත්
DSI සුපර් ස්පෝර්ට් නියම ඔරිජිනල් පාසල් පාවාන්
කොහෙ ගියත් ඔබේ අතේ තිබුණු දෙයක් අතහරින්න කලින් දෙපාරක් හිතන්න ඔබට දළදා සමිඳු පිහිටයි.
තවත් තෑගිරාශයක් දරු දිරි සම්පත ජාතික ලොතරැයි මණ්ඩලය. මැදිකරගත් බිස්කට් කැබලි වලින් වටු එලිෆන්ට් හවුස් වොන්ඩර් චොක් ෂොක්.
A journey awaits.
මුළු පවුලට සතුට සදන සිඟ අද විශිෂ්ට විශ්වාසය.
සේෆ්ගාඩ් නිරෝගිමත් දිවියකට.
Now you are watching the world most historical and the cultural event Kandy Esala Perahera live from the royal city of Kandy.
කද තේජසින් යුතුව වැඩම වීමට පින් වන්දාමි සාදු මමලං ජිනදන්ත ධාතු
ඔබ සැමට උතුම් දළදා සමිඳු සරණයි. ඓතිහාසික කන්ද උඩරට ඇසල පෙරහැර මංගල්‍යයේ දෙවන රන්දෝලි පෙරහර වීදි සංචාර කිරීම සඳහා සියලු කටයුතු සූදානම්. මල්ලොත් ඔස්කිරි උභය මහා විහාරීය මහා නායක මාහිම්පාණන් වහන්සේලාගේ අවවාද අනුශාසනා පෙරදැරිව ශ්‍රී දළදා මාලිගාවේ ගරු දේවන් නිලමේතුමන් සිව් මහා දේවාලයන්හි බස්නායක නිලමේතුමන්ලාගේ දායකත්වයෙන් මෙවර පෙරහැර සංවිධානය වෙනවා. අද දවසේ පෙරහැර කරුණු වහන්සේ වැඩම කරවන්නේ ශ්‍රී දළදා මාලිගා පන්තියේ ප්‍රධානියා ඉන්දිරාජා හස්තියා විසින්. ඉන්දිරාජා හස්තියා පෙරහැර කණ්ඩුව වැඩමවමින් සඳල්ගල මතට පා තැබෙන අනතුරුව අද දවසේ පෙරහැර කටයුතු ආරම්භ වෙනවා. දෑලිය ඇතුන් ලෙස මියන් රාජා සහ බුරුම රාජා ගමන් කිරීමට නියමිතයි. අද දවසේ දළදා පෙරහැර නැරඹීම සඳහා මේ වීදිවලට ජනතාව රැස් නැහැ. මොකද රටේ පවතින යහපත් සෞඛ්‍ය තත්ත්වය නිසාවෙන්. එසේ නමුත් රූපවාහිනී මාධ්‍ය ඔස්සේ අන්තර්ජාලය ඔස්සේ අපි ඔබට ඓතිහාසික කන්ද උඩරට ඇසල පෙරහැර මංගල්‍ය ආසිරිය ගෙන එන සෝදානම්. ඒ නිසා ඔබට බොහොමත් බැත්සිතින් ගෞරවයෙන් ආරාධනා කරනවා ඓතිහාසික කන්ද උඩරට ඇසල පෙරහැර මහා මංගල්‍යයේ දෙවන රන්දෝලි පෙරහැරේ ආසිරිය අත්විඳින්නට.
Dalada Samidu Pihitai. We are now joining us with a special live broadcast of the second Randoli Perahera, brought to you by the Media Bureau of Sri Dalada Maligawa.
You are now seeing Perahera officials obtaining the permission and blessings of Diyavadana Nilame before commencing their street perambulations.
And this is the moment when the Diyavadana Nilame hands over the keys to the officiating bhikkhus.
Making his way from the upper to the lower chamber, the Diyavadana Nilame ceremoniously and reverentially takes the relic casket under the protection of the chief incumbent, of the Malwatu Mahaviharaya, Venerable Tibbatuave Sri Medankara Thero, to the royal tusker.
The relic casket is placed within the Randoli, mounted on the adorned tusker, who will light up the second Randoli Perahera today.
See how the garlands of flowers have been sprinkled on the Sri Dalada Maligawa's relic casket.
And now, this is the devout moment when the great tusker steps majestically down from the Mahawahalkada to the Sandagala in preparation to walk the streets of the Kandy. And this tusker, who is privileged today to carry the sacred burden of the relic casket, is none other than the Indiraja tusker, who belongs to the elephant stables of Sri Dalada Maligawa. Thus begins the second Randoli Perahera, which is brought to you live by the broadcasting unit of Sri Dalada Maligawa.
And now we see the whip crackers leading the streets, marking the commencement of Sri Dalada Perahera. In fact, this is the second Randoli procession taking on the streets of the hill capital city.
Talking about this entire Dalada procession, this Perahera, or the procession, is very much bound with the natural phenomena. And these whip crackers symbolize the thunder which precedes rain, because the procession is usually held, it is annually held, to invoke the rain gods. And these whip crackers invoke the rain gods by symbolizing the thunder.
Indeed, Sachini. The duty of the whip cracker is to clear the way to the holy Perahera casket.
These whip crackers, of course, formulate one of the very first sights that we see in the Dalada procession. In single file, these whip crackers wield their whips to notify the citizens of the impending approach of the procession.
The whip has to be carefully manipulated without hurting their colleagues.
The whip master's duty is handed down from generation to generation of their clans. According to our traditions, Peraheras that do not have this pedigree are not even worth being called such.
Along with the thundering, we can always see lightning before a rain. And the fireball dancers we can see far from behind are symbolizing this lightning effect.
Of course, when talking about producing this lightning effect, we mentioned that the sound of the whips are very much similar to the sound of lightning strikes. The reason is this, as we mentioned earlier as well, paying homage to rain gods, requesting to bless our crops and cultivations with rain. And now we see the fireball dancers behind. Just as lightning flashes across the skies, the Perahera too has its flashes of light leaping across the faces of the people. And this is the offering of fire to the gods to water the earth with rain.
And we can see very young individual performers showing off their skills. And this is a very good sign, isn't it, Sachini? This is a very good sign that shows us that our cultural heritage will be preserved for the future generations.
In fact, these blinding flashes are cooling heat in the entire Kandy Esala procession.
The balls of fire these dancers are wielding in rotational forms is painting the night with varied patterns of light. Once oil-soaked rags are lit and tied to the ends of the wielding sticks with leather tongs, they are akin to lightning strikes to the eye.
These dancers tame fire and give it as a Dalada offering, mindful of its part in cooking, protecting crops and chenas, and dispelling darkness, while creating curiosity, satisfaction, and amazement.
The sun, moon, earth, universe, solar month, night and day are all cyclic, and the fire dancers highlight these universal cycles and how they burn and cool us in our own life cycles.
The fire dancers completely focused and immersed in their art, keeping their minds and bodies one-pointed as they create their cyclic patterns of fire. This is because the slightest inattention could result in disaster.
The dancers are seen creating their paintings of fire across the night sky as they move in procession. For the children, it is a fire play, but for the experienced elders, it is a devout and committed fire dance.
The fiery life cycle of washing, desire, ignorance, and anger is highlighted by the chakras painted by these fire dancers.
Following that, we can see a national flag bearer leading Buddhist flag bearers.
The sight of the Buddhist flag creates a sense of unreflecting joy on the part of the people within the Kandy Esala procession, reminding them that this is a celebration, devotion, and offering to the Buddha.
I think we should make this an opportunity to give the credits to the creators of the Buddhist flag. The Buddhist flag was jointly designed by Mr. J.R. De Silva and Colonel Henry Olcott to mark the revival of Buddhism in Ceylon. It was accepted as the international Buddhist flag in 1952 at the World Buddhist Congress.
In fact, the white-clad flag bearers remind the people of the way the Buddha's Dhamma impacts their lives and the way to obtain release from the cycle of life. And also, it is to be noted that these Buddhist flag bearers are the inmates of the Pallekele open prison. Up next, we have the cloth flag bearers. These are, in fact, the area flags. The area flag bearers display the standards of all of the areas that came under the control of the Senkadagala king.
Indeed, and this is an indication that shows the people who are within the procession about the kingdom of the Kandyan king. The people were able to identify if the governance of the Kandyan kings was well and in accordance with Rajadharma. In those times, the display of these flags was also a political symbol.
This is the traditional display of the provincial standards that remind the present day of the glory and sovereignty of the time of the Senkadagala kings. As the cloth flag bearers leave our sight, we now see the brass standard bearers.
Both gold and brass workers belong to the same clan, or in other words, Gurukulaya, and this is the Navandana clan.
These brass Disa flags also represent the glory of the Senkadagala kingdom. All these flag bearers remind us of the fact that this procession is one of the national importance as well as religious importance.
With the durability of the brass flag, the kings of old offered their hope of similar durability and sustainability to the nation.
And now you see the sword bearers. These sword bearers symbolize the protection given to the Perahera. And they are representing the Rittigala Vishuddhi martial arts group.
Indeed, from the times of yore, the sword warriors were a symbol of protection to the whole country. And their art, in particular the Angampura art, was one of the unique martial art traditions marking the Sinhala heritage of the country.
And this is the Peramune Rala. Clad in white robes, the Peramune Rala comes into view, ceremoniously carrying the secretarial scroll. And this elephant we now see is Banda elephant, who belongs to the Honorable Devadan Nilame of Sri Dalada Maligawa. The duty of the Peramune Rala leading the elephant procession is to inform the citizenry that the procession is being carried out in accordance with the directives of the scroll.
This scroll is made of ola leaves. It contains in great detail the worship traditions and rituals due to the sacred relic as well as information on the processions of the Dalada Maligawa and its royal duties.
And this is the troop of the very first Hevesi beaters. Until the Hevesi drum beaters permanently seconded to the service of the Dalada Maligawa arrive in procession, no Panchature Vadana or making of sound using either drums or musical instruments is permitted.
The Perahera is a yearly occurrence to pay homage to the sacred tooth relic. It is therefore a yearly tradition that the four leaders of the Hevesi troop arrive first in the Dalada procession.
These, the four great bands of Dalada Maligawa, namely Uduvela, Malagammana, Ihalavela and Molagodu, contribute with great devotion and pageantry to the celebration.
We can hear the beats of the drums and the tunes of the Horanava soaring up to the skies up above, the Tsenkadala kingdom. These heavy beaters convey the message of the impending approach of the procession. And right behind them we now see the second elephant of the procession, and this is the Gajanayak Nilame, or the royal official in charge of the king's troop of elephants, riding on the Veera elephant who belongs to the Sankapetti Vihara in Kaduvela. The position of the Gajanayak Nilame is a position given to him directly by the king himself. Therefore, the Gajanayak Nilame is seen in the procession on the back of a majestic tusker.
At the present Gajanayak Nilame is Mr. Palitha Jayawardena. And now we see the Beetle Dancers.
The task of the Beetle Dancers is to welcome the people of the country to witness and gain wholesome thoughts about the procession and to pay homage to the sacred tooth relic.
These dancers have been trained by Nalin Jayasekara of Sri Dalada Maligawa. This symbolic dance is not only an invitation to the throngs of people, but it is also an invitation to the sacred casket to proceed in a ceremonious pomp along the streets of the city.
Following that, we can see a magnificent elephant, and mounted on him is a Buddhist flag bearer.
This tusker, now we see, also belongs to Sri Dalada Maligawa. This tusker is Janaraja, who was gifted to Sri Dalada Maligawa in 1988 by the former president J.R. Jayawardena. Janaraja is quite famous for his beautiful tusks, and today on his mount we see a Buddhist flag bearer, once again reminding us that this procession is a religious, a Buddhist procession. You see the fan dancers. They also have a symbolic effect in the Dalada procession.
It is a tradition to fan the sacred tooth relic, and this tradition continues when it is in procession during the Kandy Esala Perahera. As an act of devotion to the relic, these dancers use a fan made of fine threads and cords and engage in a controlled dance symbolizing their worship.
We can see that this troupe of dancers consists of very young dancers, in fact, again symbolizing that this Perahera, or the procession, is an act which is passed down through generations. This beautiful elephant we now see is the Kajaba Elephant, who belongs to Mr. Ranjit Vijay Singh of Yakkala. Kajaba is one of the tallest, majestic and obedient members among our domestic elephants.
And mounted on him, we can see a canopy bearer. This canopy is a signification for the protection provided to the relic casket throughout the procession. We can see bowl leaves hanging from the canopy, which symbolizes once again that this is a Buddhist festival.
As white-clad Kajaba leaves our sight, we are about to see another precious segment in the Dalada procession. In fact, this is one of the most oldest dance forms in the Kandy Esala Perahera. This is a troupe of Nyani Dancers. The Nyani Dance was a traditional dance by experienced artists dressed in Nyani dancing ornaments without the head covering or the headgear of the dancing ornaments.
Indeed, and that is what differentiates the Nyani performance from West dance. This Nyani dancing troupe has been trained by Mr. Vasanta Rajangana and Mr. Vasanta Gunatilaka. This is also a dancing item of the Kandian tradition, which had to be learned before the West Natum or the West dance. This was used as a debut for a West Natum. Tusker, whom we see now, is another precious tusker in the royal elephant stables of Sri Dalada, Maligawa. He is namely Sindhu, who belongs to the most venerable Mahanayaka Thero of the Malvatta chapter. Sindhu is a very mild, obedient, single-tusked tusker. And this is a troupe of tambourine players. The tambourine dance, like many of the dancing styles performed in the Kandy Esala Perahera, takes vigorous and timely trainings.
These players use the hand tambourine or the atrabana that we call in Sinhala. And in fact, what they do here is an action of taming the rabana or the hand tambourine in a very disciplined manner. When you look at this, It is very obvious that this is something which has to be done very carefully. And these players have mastered this.
The clans of the handheld tambourines are exclusively Kandian. The skill of playing, spinning, and using the tambourine as an instrument to accompany the invoking of the qualities of the Buddha are handed down from father to son, generation to generation. We can see very young tambourine players showing off their skills, honoring the sacred tooth relic.
Following the tambourine players, we see a group of tuskers and elephants. The one on the left side is the elephant Madhu, who is from Badulumuti Angana Raja Mahaviharaya. And the middle one is Kote Raja, the tusker Kote Raja, who belongs to Kote Raja Mahaviharaya. And the one on the right side is none other than Singharaja, who belongs to Sri Dalada Maligawa.
Indeed. And on their mounts we can see the Burmese flag. Burma and Sri Lanka has had so much close relations because they are both Buddhist countries.
And this is the very first trio of tuskers and elephants that we see in the Maligawa procession. Up next we see the Pantera Dancers.
The panteru or tambourines without the screen bring the purity of the Dalada procession. Talking about the panteru, the ring is a thin circlet of light brass. Therefore, the dance of the panteru players is subtle and soft.
We can say that it is only in the hill capital, Kandy, that we are able to witness the Pantera Dance in its most authentic form. Up next is another trio of elephants. We have Punchibanda elephant, who belongs to Mr. Kitsuri Velagedara, and the Savi elephant, who belongs to Mahiyangana Rajamahaviharaya, and Raja, who belongs to Miss Sita Sena Nayaka Mallava. This trio also adds glamour to the splendid second Randoli procession.
And once again on their mounts, we can see the Burmese flag and a canopy signifying the protection provided to the Esala Perahera.
Now we see the first troop of West dancers in the Kandy Esala procession.
Indeed, this is one of the most awaited moments. The West dancing is one of the unique pieces of our culture. This troupe of West dancers have been trained by Mr. Ishanta Ihalavela and Mr. Lasanta Vansekara.
The first troop of West dancers is welcoming the sacred casket.
Indeed, the West dancers are not only used in Perahera, we also see them in many auspicious occasions like this. Following the West dancing troupe, we now see the Karya Korale. The Karya Karavana Korale is the second in command of the Diyavadana Nilame, and it is a heritage position given by royal decree. He specially observes if the pavada are properly placed, if the protectors on the Dal elephants are executing the duties correctly, and whether the streets are open and free of encumbrances, etc.
And now we are seeing the most precious moment in the entire Dalada procession. The great task of carrying the Dalada casket falls to a fortunate tusker, and today this majestic individual who obtains that chance or the opportunity is none other than the Indiraja tusker, who was donated by late Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi of India, and he is a precious individual in the Dalada Maligawa elephant stables. He is accompanied by the two Dale elephants, Burma Raja and Mian Raja. And now we see the Chamber of Versifiers in the Dalada Maligawa singing hymns in praise of the Lord Buddha as well as the sacred tooth relic. And now we see the flower lantern group. In this group, we see very young children carrying flowers and lanterns as an offering to the sacred tooth relic. All these groups taking part in the Dalada procession remind us of the Dalada heritage.
And now we see the second West dancing troupe of the Dalada Perahera.
This troupe of West dancers, in fact, paves the way for the Diyavada Nilame. These West dancers are led by Susanda Surasena and Sanjeeva Verapitiya.
It should be noted that the costume of the West dancers is a 64-pieced costume. has been existing in Sri Lanka since the times of King Panduwasadeva.
And this item is considered to be one of the most iconic performances in the entire procession. And we now see the Devada Nilame taking the streets of the Kandian kingdom. The Devada Nilame, appointed by royal decree, is the individual tasked with protecting the Dalada with his own life. And this is the current Devada Nilame of Sri Dalada Maligawa, Honorable Pradeep Nilanga Dala.
The honor and respect provided by the Tun Singhale to the king for the land is given to the Devada Nilame.
The Devada Nilame ensures that the rituals and traditions associated with the Dalada Maligawa are strictly adhered to. Additionally, he is responsible for protecting those who are part of the great Dalada heritage.
And around him we can see the guards giving him the due protection.
He is also accompanied by the leaders of the 10 villages or the Vidanes of the 10 villages. It is also to be noted that only the Devada Nilame is permitted to walk under a Muthukuda or pearl umbrella, since he represents the king himself in this procession.
Indeed, and it should be noted that the costume that Devada Nilame is wearing is of the traditional nobility.
The final responsibility for the whole of this mighty procession rests upon the Devada Nilame.
This is the Vidanes of the 10 villages.
As these officials are accompanying the Devada Nilame of the Maligawa, we are now about to see the commencement of the Natha Devala procession. The first of the four Devala Peraharas is that of the Natha Devale. It is accepted that God Natha is the coming Buddha.
We now see the godly ornaments of God Natha being carried to be placed on the tasker appointed with the task of carrying it on the streets of Kandy.
And now the godly ornaments of God Natha are being placed on the Tusker Muthuraja.
What we see now is the group of Buddhist flag bearers representing the Natha Devalaya.
The Perahera of the Natha Devale is dedicated to God Natha, who is believed to be aspiring to attain Buddhahood in future. Therefore, the Natha Devala Perahera is also formed in line with traditional Buddhist worship forms that are more stately and circumspect in their import.
The six-colored flag is displayed in ceremonious form to remind the tradition about Buddhism to the people. And it reminds us of the simplicity and the depth of Buddha's Dhamma.
And this is the very first elephant that we see in the Natha Devala procession. This elephant is the front elephant in the Natha Devala procession, who is namely Rohana, who belongs to Mr. Varuna Kannangara.
It should be noted that the color attributed to God Natha is yellow. So throughout the Natha Devala procession, we will be seeing the yellow color, honoring the god Natha.
And we see the very first elephant is also robed in beautiful yellow, reminding us of the complexion of God Natha. And this is a beautiful heavy display in the Natha Devala procession.
troupe of heavy performers have been trained by Mr. S.Y.P. Vijay Sena.
Now we see the second elephant in the Natha Devala procession, namely Taraka, who belongs to Mr. Gayan Hinkenda. Mounted on the Taraka elephant is the Gajanayaka Nilame of the Natha Devala. Taraka is also robed in gleaming yellow, reminding us that the color which is associated with God Natha is yellow.
Following up that, we now see a group of Savarang dancers making their way in the streets of the hill capital.
Similar to the Chamara fans, Savaran dancers use fans made of fine threads to send cool embraces in devotion to the gods.
It is said that in the days of yore, it was the tail of the Samara deer that lived in India that was used for this purpose. And the air blown through the fine strands of its tail hair was said to be the most refreshing in the world.
The tunes we now hear are very pleasing to the ears, and these tunes resound from the hills.
Another interesting fact about the Natha Devala procession's performers is the fact that they are also clothed in yellow color. This once again represents that this is a procession in honor of God Natha.
And now we see two elephants in the Natha Devala procession. The first elephant is Vijitaraja, who belongs to Dimulagala Raja Mahavihare, and the next is Kandula, who belongs to Mr. S.K. Roshan of Maharagama.
And now we see the group of Tammata.
We now see a group of tambourine dancers in the Natha Devala procession. In fact, this is the first time we see a vibrant dance form using tambourines as the instrument.
This group of tambourine dancers have been trained by Mr. Anjana Gamage.
It's really a beautiful sight to see how these youngsters are keenly engaged in this beautiful performance. And now we see another beautiful elephant in the Natha Devala procession, also clad in gleaming yellow.
Now we see the Tammatam players. These players display their skills in this traditional heritage instrument of the country.
The sound of the Tammatama is also synonymous with the Dalada Perahera. And this duo of elephants we now see are Bandara and Kumari. Bandara and Kumari belong to Mr. Kamal Kitsire. They also join the procession, reminding us once again of the complexion of the god Natha.
Following the two elegant elephants, now we see another West dancing troupe.
This is in fact the first West troupe in the Natha Devala procession, led by Mr. Chitraratna.
And these West dancers are welcoming the godly ornaments of god Natha.
majestic elephant's presence is usually signaled by the distinct strains of the Gajagavannama. We now see these West dancers welcoming the most precious tusker in the Nathadevala procession. And this is the chief incumbent of the Nathadevale. Talking about the elephant who is privileged today to carry the godly ornaments of God Natha, this is Muthuraja of Aludgama Kande Vihare. Muthuraja has been carrying the godly ornaments of God Natha for a long time. He was donated by the royal family of Thailand, and he is renowned for his long tusks. Today he is assisted by Rani of Godagama, who belongs to Mr. Nalaka Jayasingha, and Kumari of Kande Vihare.
And now we see another group of spectacular West dancers making their way to pay homage to the godly ornaments of God Natha. This troupe of West dancers have been trained by Mr. Asanka Karunaratna.
Observing and overseeing the Nathadevala procession in the second Randoli Perahera, we have Mr. Iriyagama, the Basnayaka Nilame of Vegiriya Nathadevale, which is considered a Pitisara Devale. Representing the Basnayaka Nilame of Nathadevale, the Nilame of the Nathadevale of Vegiriya is now taking the Kandy streets.
is surrounded by guards giving him the due protection to walk the streets of Kandy, representing the Sri Natha Devalaya in Kandy.
As that marks the end of the Natha Devala procession, we are now about to witness the beginning of the Vishnu Devala procession.
We are now seeing the godly ornaments of God Vishnu being carried to be placed on the tasker assigned with the task of carrying it in the streets of Kandy city.
The Perahera or the procession of Vishnu Devala represents God Vishnu, who is thought to be the god overseeing the well-being of the island of Lanka.
Indeed, he is also considered as one of the main gods in Hinduism. And now we see the flag bearers representing the Vishnu Devala procession. And these are the district flags of the ancient Kandy kingdom.
One can say that those who take part in this Perahera are mostly clad in blue, since this is the color associated with God Vishnu. And also, the vehicle of God Vishnu is Gurula, which is a mythical bird. And in these flags also we can see God Vishnu's symbol, which is Gurula. This is the first elephant in the Vishnu Devala procession, who is Rama, who belongs to Mr. Tudor Gunasekara of Heyantuduva. Rama is a one-tusker.
Now we see the heavy troop representing the Vishnu Devala procession.
The unique sound which is produced by these instruments is a very unique sound which is quite synonymous with the Dalada procession. Once again, these heavy beaters tell us of the impending approach of the Vishnu Devala procession. And this is the second elephant, who is named Taraka. On the mount of Taraka we see the Gajanayaka Nilame of the Vishnu Devala. Taraka belongs to Rankadu Pattini Devale of Kaduela. Taraka is also clad in beautiful blue, and on his robe we see the symbol or the vehicle of God Vishnu once again.
Now we see another group of energetic Savarang dancers. We can see that these dancers are also clad in glimmering blue color, representing once again the color of God Vishnu.
We could say that it is with great devotion that these dancers stylize their fanning in ordered columns. And this elephant is Banda Elephant, who belongs to Mr. Sisira Samarakon of Polgahaveli.
What we see now is a spectacular wooden stick dancers group.
This is in fact the very first group of wooden stick dancers in the entire procession.
The Lee Kelly or wooden stick dance is an instantly recognizable cultural icon of the Kandyan kingdom. It depicts the traditional martial art of Angampora.
And now we have a duo of elephants. One is Kandula from Mutiyangana Raja Mahavihara in Badulla, and the other one is Muthu, who belongs to Mr. Indikamudunkot of Manikhinna.
And now we see a group of Udaki players, accompanied by a young castanet player and a troupe likewise.
In this elephant trio, we have Gagana, Gamunu and Tikiri. Gagana and Gamunu are from the Pinnavala Elephant Orphanage, and Tikiri belongs to Mr. Jagatvitana of Matugama. And this is a very young elephant trio.
We can also see a snake head canopy mounted on one of the three elephants. Now we see a group of Pantera Dancers making their way on the streets of Kandy.
are fortunate enough to witness a very magnificent performance. Up next, we have another trio of elephants. In fact, we have two she-tuskers, None and Kumari. And in the middle, we have Sanju, who is also a young elephant.
Once again on their mounts, we can see snake head canopies, signifying the protection provided to the Perahera.
And now, this is the first West troop in the Vishnu Devala procession.
Welcomed by the West dancers, we can now see the chief incumbent of Sri Vishnu Devalaya marching forward.
And this is the most precious moment, the most awaited moment in this segment of the Perahera. The fortunate elephant who was lucky enough to carry the godly ornaments of God Vishnu today is Suranimala, who belongs to Alutnuwara Dadimunda Devale. And on either side of him, we see the she-tusker Mali and the she-tusker Vasana. Mali belongs to Mr. Chatura Vikramanayaka and Vasana belongs to Miss Krishanti Alapatha. With that, we see the second troop of West dancers in the Vishnu Devala procession.
In the ancient times, it is said that the West dancers obtained a royal boon after having donned their West tattoo and danced for the king of Pandavas Nuara to dispel unseen hostile forces that threatened his life. West dancers are usually assigned to pave the way for the Basnaik Nilame of Vishnu Devale. And today, they are paving the way for the two Nilames, Mr. Bradley Amunugama and Mr. Priyantha Amunugama, representing the Basnaik Nilame of Vishnu Devale. And they are from the Pittisara Devales. With that, we mark the end of the Sri Vishnu Devalaya and the commencement of Sri Kataragama Devalaya procession.
Kataragama Devalaya in Kandy is also one of the oldest Devalayas. The third Devala Perahera in the entire Dalada procession is that of the Kataragama Devalaya. This Devalaya was built in the 14th century and it became more popular in the 16th century. It was dedicated to God Skandakumara or God Kataragama.
What we are seeing now is the placement of the godly ornaments of God Kataragama on the mount of the tusker,
marking the commencement of the Kataragama Devala procession. As usual, we now have the Buddhist flag bearers. Having Buddhist flag bearers in each section of the Perahera is a reminder that this procession or this celebration is a Buddhist celebration. God Kataragama was believed to have 6 faces and 12 hands. The color worn by most of the participants in this section is red, since this is the color associated with God Kataragama.
One more interesting fact about God Kataragama is that he has a vehicle of a peacock. So throughout this procession we will see symbols of peacocks.
And in these flags too, we see the symbol or the vehicle of God Kataragama, which is peacock.
Now we see the heavy troop representing the Sri Kataragama Devala procession. This troupe of heavy dancers have been trained by Mr. P.V. James.
And now we see the first elephant in the Kataragama Devala procession. This elephant is of course a she-tusker. It's not an elephant, a she-tusker, namely Manike, who belongs to Mr. Anurakempitiya. And we have on Manike the Gajanayaka Nilame of the Kataragama Devalaya. And Manike is also clad in gleaming red, representing the color of God Kataragama.
Now we see a troupe of castanet players.
The castanets help all Pantera dancers to keep time as each troupe goes through their moves in accordance with various timing patterns, and it is a necessary part of this procession.
The castanet players create that mix of tonal qualities and timing counts, reminding the people of the event and timely life of the Buddha.
mention now is the Tusker Kapuru, who belongs to Mr. Mahesh Vijayasekara of Veyangoda. On Kapuru's robes, we see the beautifully painted symbol of gold, or the vehicle of gold, the peacock.
And now we see another group of Udaki performers trained by Mr. Dhammika Bandara Tennakon.
The chants that we hear in this particular dance are very unique.
The Udaki is a hand drum and it holds a special place in Dalada celebrations.
And now we see another she-tasker. This is the she-tasker Kumari, who belongs to Mr. Vijay Nilmini of Balangoda. On Kumari's mount also we see the officials representing the Kataragama Devali.
Now we see another very energetic group of wooden stick dancers.
Of course, in this segment of the Perahera, in particular in the Kataragama Devali Perahera, we can see a lot of vibrant dancing performances.
God Kataragama is also considered as one of the chief gods in Hinduism. He is also recognized in Buddhism as a very powerful god. In fact, he is the son of the chief god Shiva in Hinduism.
And this is another young tusker who is namely Vishwa, who belongs to the Shasana Vardhana Pirivena of Maligawa.
What we see now is a peacock dance. As peacock is a very vibrant colored animal, we can also see the vibrant colored dresses worn by these performers.
As we mentioned earlier as well, god Kataragama is believed to ascend on the back of a peacock. Since it is dedicated to god Kataragama, since this segment of the Perahera is dedicated to god Kataragama, peacock dance is a very unique feature. One can hear the heady fast beat that is classically associated with the Kavadi dance.
It should be noted that the Kavadi dance, as along with many features of the Kataragama Devala procession, is largely influenced by the South Indian influence. Along with the Kavadis, we can see the weapon associated with god Kataragama, the Velayuda.
The Kavadi Dance as well as the Peacock Dance are two most awaited performances in the Katharagama Devala Perahera. Following the Kavadi dancers, we now have the she-tasker Sama, who belongs to Uduwe Dammalokatero.
And now we see the West dancing troupe of Sri Katharagama Devalaya. This West dancing troupe is welcoming and paving the way to the chief incumbent of Sri Katharagama Devalaya.
The Katharagama Devalaya procession represents many South Indian influences, and we see the Tawil Nadaswaram group, which paves the way for the chief incumbent of the Katharagama Devalaya. These instruments as well as the rhythms produced are very much South Indian, and it is truly beautiful to see the coexistence of all these traditions in the Dalada Perahera.
Indeed, this is one of the reasons that Sri Esala Maha Perahera is one of the most beautiful cultural events in the country.
Of course. And this is the chief incumbent of the Katharagama Devalaya, dressed in classical South Indian robes. And we now see the most awaited moment in the Katharagama Devala procession itself. Carrying the godly ornaments of God Katharagama is the Tusker Sankaraja from Sankapala Rajamahavihare. And the two elephants who ride on either side of Sankaraja are none other than the Tusker Aruna, who belongs to Venerable Higgoda Sri Saddhananda Thero, and the elephant Esala, who belongs to Pirisyala Senanayaka Mudalinda Rame.
Now we see the second West dancing troupe of Sri Katharagama Devala procession.
This troupe of West dancers is now paving the way for the Nilame representing the Basnayak Nilame of Katharagama Devalaya today. And this is Mr. Gayan Kanishka Bandara Valisundara, who is representing the Basnayak Nilame of Katharagama Devalaya in the second Randoli procession today.
these West dancers speculately welcoming the representative of the Basnayak Nilame of Sri Kataragama Devalaya.
He is also accompanied by guards and officials. And now we are about to witness the commencement of the Pattini Devala procession.
Now we see the godly ornaments of goddess Pattini being placed on the mount of the tasker assigned.
Yes, and now we see the commencement of the Perahera with the Buddhist flag bearers coming into our sight. And now we see the first elephant in the Pattini Devala procession. This elephant is of course a she-tasker who is namely Sita, who belongs to Mr. S.M. Roshan of Maharagama. And now we see the group of Hevisi beaters in the Pattini Devala procession. They also tell us of the impending approach of the Pattini Devala procession.
It should be remembered that the Pattini procession is the only representation of the female. Goddess Pattini is one of the most well-known and revered goddesses in the Sri Lankan culture. Goddess Pattini is also associated with the fertility and prosperity.
Following the Hevisi beaters, we have the second elephant in the Pattini Devala procession. This young elephant is Isuru, who belongs to Mahiyangana Rajamaha Vihara. And now we have a beautiful dancing segment in the Pattini Devala procession.
And this is a female Pantera dancing performance trained by Miss Vindhya Kulasiri.
As we mentioned earlier too, it is only in this part of the procession we can see a female representation. What we see now is something like that.
The addition of these female dancers magnified the beauty of the Kandy Esala Perahera.
We have two elephants now in the Pattini Devala procession. These two elephants are Chula elephant and the Ratna elephant. Chula elephant belongs to Bengamue Dammadinna Nayaka Tero, and Ratna Elephant belongs to Bengamue Dammadinna Nayaka Tero. Up next is also another beautiful dancing segment performed by female dancers. In fact, this is a Goyam Dance.
The Goyam Dance is a mixed folk dance. It represents how the agrarian society of Sri Lanka functioned in the ancient times. It was a collaboration of both males and females.
These dancers carry instruments, dancing instruments, which can be recognized as the ones which were used in the agrarian society of Sri Lanka. And this elephant is the Pillumale elephant, who is from the Pinnavala elephant orphanage. He is also clad in beautiful yellow robes representing the color of goddess Pattini.
Following that, we can see a female fan dancing troupe. And these fan dancers or chamara dancers have been trained by Miss Ajanta Kandagedara.
This dance is also very significant because it is for the very first time in the entire procession we see a group of female dancers, young female dancers performing a Savaran dance. Up next is another elephant, and this elephant is namely Banda, who belongs to Mr. Kitsiri Kahatapitiya of Horala. On Banda's mount too, we see an official from the Pattini Devalaya.
Following that, we see another spectacular dancer dancing by female dancers. This troupe of dancers have been trained by Miss Lakshmi Kumari.
Of course, it's truly beautiful to see how these female dancers add grace to the Pattini Devala procession. As this group of female dancers leaves our sight, we now see another elephant. And this is not just an elephant, this is also a she-tusker, namely Manike, who belongs to Miss Shriyani Gunawardana of Dan Ovita.
And on her mount, we can see an official bearing a snakehead canopy.
And this is the first troupe of West dancers, welcoming the most precious segment in the Pattini Devala procession. Taking the streets with their unique rhythm and chants, these West dancers in the Pattini Devala Perahera now welcome the chief incumbent as well as the most important trio of elephants in the Pattini Devala procession.
This troupe of energetic West dancers have been trained by Mr. Mithun Bandara. Now we see the chief trustee of Sri Pattini Devala procession.
Following the chief trustee of the Pattini Devale, we now see the three elephants. The elephant, who is lucky enough to carry the godly ornaments of goddess Pattini, is none other than Mangala, who belongs to Mr. Udaragalapatti of Giriolla, and on his either side we have the she-tusker Manike, who belongs to Mr. H.R.S.U. Nishankar, and the other she-tusker is the she-tusker from Gonakumbura, who belongs to Mr. Richard Gonakumbura. And these three perform the most important task in the Pattini Devala procession.
And now we can see the second troupe of West dancers paying their honors to goddess Pattini.
In this moonlit night, we now see the second Randoli Perahera taking the streets. The second troupe of West dancers in the Pattini Devala procession is welcoming the Nilame representing the Basnayak Nilame of Pattini Devale. Marching in the second Randoli procession today is the Nilame, the Basnayak Nilame from Ambakka Sri Kataragama Devale, Mr. A.W.S. Bandaranayaka. And today, Mr. A.W.S. Bandaranayaka, the Nilame of Ambakka Sri Kataragama Devale, is representing the Basnayak Nilame of Pattini Devale in Kandy. He is accompanied by guards. And now we see the palanquins of the 4 devalayas in Kandy are being carried at the end of the second Randoli procession, and this is why the Randoli procession has taken its name. And the palanquins of Natha, Vishnu, Kataragama and Pattini devalayas are now being carried at the end.
Indeed. This differentiates the Randoli Perahera from Kumbal Perahera, because this can only be seen in the Randoli procession.
What you just saw was the conclusion of the second Randoli Perahera.
We are grateful for the help and commitment of both state and non-state supporters who work tirelessly to make this event successful.
Let there be timely rains that will bring life-giving water to our fields and ensure a bountiful harvest. May our country prosper. Dalada Samidu Pihitai.
සිංකණ්ඩ ශෛලපුර විරාජමාන වූ මුදුන් මල්කට බඳු දළදා සමිඳු ඇඳ අවසර ගන්නේ උතුම් පෙරහැර කරුණ වහන්සේ ගජ තේජසින් යුතුව වැඩම වීමට පින් ලැබේ වන්දාමි සාදු මමලං ජිනදන්ත ධාතු